What if I told you that a 3-year-old asking why over and over again is doing something more profound than most adults ever attempt? That in those relentless questions lies the key to unlocking life's deepest mysteries. Philosophy isn't about dusty books or complicated theories. It's about reclaiming that childlike wonder we've forgotten. Today, we're going on a journey through 100 levels of philosophy's greatest paradoxes, starting with the simplest question of all: why? By the end, you'll see how that one word can transform, not just how you think, but how you live. Welcome to an adventure that began in ancient Greece and leads directly to the most urgent questions of our digital age. Ready to think like a philosopher? Let's begin with Level 1. Level 1. The childlike wonder of asking, why? At the heart of philosophy lies a question so simple, so fragile, that we often overlook its power. It is the small, stubborn word, why. Children ask it without hesitation. Why is the sky blue? Why do we grow old? Why do we sleep? They ask with no agenda, no theory. No pride in appearing clever. Their questions are unshielded, raw, and alive. In that innocence lies the seed of philosophy. The adult world, by contrast, tends to silence why. We replace it with routines, with assumptions, with the comfort of knowing, or at least pretending to know. We settle into explanations that satisfy enough to move on, but rarely enough to pierce the veil of mystery. Yet philosophy begins the moment we allow ourselves to return to the child's relentless curiosity. The question why does not always yield an answer, and that is precisely its gift. To ask is to keep the mind open, to acknowledge the limits of our certainty. The philosopher is not the one who knows the most, but the one who refuses to stop asking. In that refusal lies freedom. Think of the times in your own life when you asked why, perhaps in grief, when loss felt unbearable, perhaps in joy, when wonder overflowed, perhaps in silence, staring at the stars, sensing the vastness of it all. These moments reveal philosophy not as an academic pursuit, but as a deeply human act. So Level 1 is not about mastering a concept. It is about remembering. Remembering that to ask why is to awaken. To awaken is to live more fully, and in that living, the journey begins. Level 2. The first philosophers of ancient Greece. Before the great systems of thought, before volumes of carefully argued philosophy, there were simply voices asking what the world was made of. These were the first philosophers of ancient Greece. They did not yet speak in long dialogues or structured treatises. Instead, they wondered aloud, seeking a pattern beneath the shifting surface of things. Thales, it is said, looked at the rivers, the seas, the rain, and concluded that water must be the origin of all. To him, everything returned to that simple, flowing element. Heraclitus, by contrast, gazed at the ever-changing world and declared that all is flux. That fire, restless and untamed, reveals the essence of reality. These early thinkers did not have laboratories or telescopes. They had only their eyes, their questions, and the courage to set aside myth in pursuit of reason. Yet even as they turned away from the stories of gods and giants, their vision remained poetic. They saw patterns where others saw chaos. They heard whispers of unity where others heard only noise. To walk among them now is to feel philosophy in its rawest form. It was not yet the polished art of argument, but the trembling birth of inquiry itself. Each claim was tentative, fragile, yet daring to reach for the whole. The first philosophers remind us that thinking need not be grand to be profound. It begins with attention, with a willingness to see beyond habit. Their voices, carried across centuries, still murmur, look closer, question deeper, trust wonder more than certainty. And so Level 2 opens the first door to the roots of reason. Level 3. Socrates and the art of questioning. Among the streets of Athens walked a man who claimed he knew nothing. Yet in that very claim, he unsettled everyone he met. His name was Socrates, and his gift was the question. Rather than offering speeches, he asked simple but piercing things. What is justice? What is virtue? What is courage? Those who thought themselves wise found their answers faltering under his gaze. He showed that knowledge is fragile, and that to admit ignorance is the first step toward wisdom. The Socratic method is less about defeating others and more about creating space, by asking questions. He loosened the tight grip of assumption. He revealed the contradictions we carry silently. He turned certainty into clay, soft enough to reshape. To live like Socrates is to accept discomfort. It means refusing easy conclusions and embracing the tension of uncertainty. Yet within that tension lies freedom. For when the walls of false knowledge crumble, the mind breathes again. The story of Socrates ends tragically, with his execution for corrupting the youth of Athens. Yet even in death, he refused to abandon the question. His calm acceptance of his fate became a lesson in itself, that philosophy is not a set of doctrines, but a way of being. Level 3 is a reminder that questioning is not weakness. It is strength in disguise. To ask is to care, to seek, to honor the truth by admitting we do not fully hold it. Socrates whispers to us still, begin always with the question. Level 4, Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine this. A group of people live chained inside a dark cave. They face a wall, unable to turn. Behind them burns a fire. Between the fire and their backs, others pass objects, casting flickering shadows on the wall. The prisoners watch these shadows and believe them to be the whole of reality. This is Plato's allegory of the cave, a story that echoes through the centuries. He asks us to consider, are we too chained? Do we mistake shadows for truth? When one prisoner is freed, he struggles at first. The fire burns his eyes, and the outside world overwhelms him. But slowly, he learns to see more clearly. The objects themselves, the sun, the vast landscape. Returning to the cave, he tries to share his discovery, yet the others laugh, doubt, or even grow hostile, unwilling to abandon the comfort of shadows. The cave is more than a story. It is a mirror, our assumptions, our habits, our unexamined beliefs. They are the chains. The shadows are the appearances we cling to, mistaking them for the real, true knowledge. Plato suggests requires turning away, even painfully, toward a higher light. Level 4 is not about escaping once and for all. It is about noticing when we are staring at shadows, about daring to turn our heads. The cave asks us what reality might lie just beyond the wall we take for certain. Level 5, Aristotle's search for the good life. If Plato pointed toward transcendent forms beyond the world, his student Aristotle turned firmly to life itself. He asked a question as old as humanity. What does it mean to live well? His answer was eudaimonia, a word often translated as happiness, though it means far more. It is flourishing, the full blossoming of human potential. For Aristotle, the good life is not found in fleeting pleasures or wealth. It is found in living in harmony with reason, cultivating virtue, and practicing balance. Courage, for example, is the midpoint between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lives between wastefulness and greed. Virtue, then, is the art of the middle path, the steady tuning of the soul like a musician tuning strings. Unlike rigid rules, Aristotle's ethics were practical. He saw life as a journey of practice. We do not become virtuous by thinking alone, but by acting, choosing, failing, and learning again. Every small decision shapes the character we carry. The good life is not perfection. It is not the absence of pain or struggle. Rather, it is the steady growth of the self toward harmony, where actions align with values and the soul resonates with purpose. Level 5 invites us to step into Aristotle's vision, not to chase fleeting joy, but to nurture a deeper flourishing. It asks us to see each day as a chance to practice, to aim for balance, and to walk the middle path toward a life not merely lived, but lived well. Level 6, the mystery of change and permanence. To live is to witness change. The seasons turn, faces age, Rivers shift their course. Nothing seems to stay as it is. Yet behind this restless flow, we sense something enduring, something permanent. This tension between change and permanence has haunted philosophy from the beginning. Heraclitus declared that everything flows. You cannot step into the same river twice, for new waters are always rushing past. Change, he said, is the essence of reality. But Parmenides, another ancient thinker, disagreed. To him, change was an illusion. Being simply is. What truly exists cannot come into being or pass away. Between them lies a paradox. If all is change, what gives the world continuity? If all is permanent, how do we explain our daily experience of motion, birth, and decay? The question remains alive in physics and metaphysics, where we still ask, is reality a fixed block of time, or a river forever flowing? For us, the paradox is not abstract. We see change in our own lives, friendships shifting, bodies growing older, moments slipping away, yet in memory, in identity, in love, there is a thread of permanence. Something endures even as everything alters. Level 6 reminds us that existence is both fragile and steady. Change and permanence dance together, weaving the pattern of life. To cling only to permanence is to deny the river. To cling only to change is to lose the ground beneath our feet. In the harmony of both, we begin to see reality more clearly. Level 7. The paradox of the one and the many. Look around and you will see countless things. Trees, stones, clouds, people. The world appears as a multitude, a scattering of separate forms. Yet behind this variety, many philosophers sensed an underlying unity, a one from which the many arise. The puzzle is ancient. If everything is one, how do the many exist? If everything is many, what unites them? Pythagoras saw number as the key, the harmony binding the cosmos. Plotinus envisioned a divine one, overflowing into the manifold of creation. Even in Eastern traditions, the paradox appears, Brahman and Atman, the unity of all being within the diversity of appearances. For the individual, the paradox is personal. You are one self, yet within you are many selves. The child you were, the adult you are, the moods, the contradictions, the masks. Society too reflects this, a collection of individuals, yet somehow a whole with its own life. The paradox of the one and the many whispers through art and science alike. Atoms combine into bodies. Words form into stories. Notes become symphonies. The many become one. And the one becomes many again. Level 7 asks us not to resolve the paradox, but to dwell in it. The world is not only a scatter of fragments, nor only a seamless whole. It is both. And perhaps its beauty lies precisely in that tension. To see unity in diversity, and diversity in unity, is to glimpse the deeper pattern of existence. Level 8, Epicurus and the pursuit of happiness. What does it mean to live happily? For Epicurus, the answer was simple, though often misunderstood. He taught that the goal of life is pleasure, not indulgence in endless feasts or luxuries, but the quiet pleasure of freedom from pain, fear, and unnecessary desire. Epicurus lived in a garden with his friends, seeking a life of simplicity. He believed that many of our sufferings come not from reality, but from the endless cravings of the mind. We chase wealth, status, or power, thinking they will satisfy us. Yet they only create more hunger. True happiness, he said, lies in moderation, friendship, and the cultivation of peace. He even addressed the greatest fear of all, death. Death is nothing to us, he wrote, for when we are, death is not, and when death is, we are not. To free ourselves from this fear is to live fully in the present, savoring each moment without the shadow of anxiety. Epicurus's vision is not of excess, but of balance. A loaf of bread, a glass of water, the company of a trusted friend. These, he believed, could be enough. Level 8 teaches that happiness is not a prize to be seized, but a garden to be tended. By quieting our desires, we uncover the gentle joys already within reach. The pursuit of happiness is less about adding more, and more about needing less. Level 9. Stoic calm in the face of chaos. Where Epicurus sought peace in simple pleasures, the Stoics sought strength in the face of storms. Life, they observed, is filled with events we cannot control. Loss, misfortune, injustice, death. Yet what remains within our power is how we respond. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca all spoke of the same truth. We do not control the world, only our judgments about it. Suffering grows not from events themselves, but from our resistance to them. To live well, then, is to align with reason, to accept what fate brings, and to cultivate inner virtue above all. The Stoic does not deny emotion, but learns to guide it. Anger, fear, or grief may rise, but they need not master us. Through discipline, reflection, and perspective, we can stand steady like a rock against the waves. In modern times, Stoicism resonates as a philosophy of resilience. Its call is not to suppress life, but to engage it with clarity, to meet difficulty with courage, and to distinguish what is within us from what lies beyond. Level 9 is a meditation on calm. To live stoically is not to feel nothing, but to feel rightly. It is to remain steady when others tremble, to act with virtue when others falter, to choose wisdom over despair. In this calm, the chaos of life becomes less a storm to fear and more a tide to navigate with grace. Level 10. The puzzle of free will and fate. Are we free to choose? Or are our choices already written? This puzzle, as old as thought itself, lingers at the center of philosophy. The Stoics leaned toward fate, seeing the cosmos as a grand order unfolding by necessity. To them, freedom meant aligning with this order, choosing to accept what cannot be changed. Yet others, from Augustine to modern thinkers, argued for the mystery of free will, the power to shape one's life beyond the pull of destiny. Science complicates the question further. If every event is caused by prior events, where is freedom? If the brain follows physical laws, is choice only an illusion? And yet, when we pause before a decision, we feel the weight of choice pressing on us, as though the future truly depends on our will. The puzzle stretches between two poles: absolute freedom, where nothing binds us, and absolute determinism, where everything is fixed. Perhaps the truth lies in the middle, in a dance of constraint and creativity, where limits shape but do not wholly define us. Level 10 does not solve the riddle. Instead, it asks us to live with the paradox, to act as though our choices matter, while also accepting that we are part of a greater web of causes. Freedom and fate may not be enemies, but companions shaping the drama of life. Level 11. The Ship of Theseus and Identity. Imagine a ship, sailing year after year. Over time, its planks rot and are replaced, its sails torn and renewed, its mast repaired again and again. One day, every single part of the ship has been replaced. The question arises, is it still the same ship? This puzzle, known as the Ship of Theseus, asks us to consider what identity truly is. Is it tied to material parts, which change constantly? Or is it tied to continuity, to the pattern, to the name, or perhaps to something intangible that persists through change? The paradox becomes sharper when we imagine all the old planks gathered and reassembled into another ship. Which is the real ship of Theseus? The one that continued its journey with new parts, or the one rebuilt from its original wood? The question echoes in our own lives. Our bodies replace their cells over time. Our thoughts shift. Our personalities evolve. Yet we still say, I am the same person. But what do we mean by same? Is it memory, continuity of consciousness, or something deeper still? Level 11 reminds us that identity is less fixed than we believe. It may not rest in the material or even in the mental, but in the ongoing story we tell, the thread of self-weaving through change. The ship of Theseus sails within us all, and in wondering whether it remains itself, we begin to wonder whether we, too, are more fluid than solid. Level 12. Zeno's Arrow Paradox. Picture an arrow flying through the air. At any given instant, it occupies a single point in space, unmoving. If at every moment it is at rest, how can it ever move at all? This is Zeno's Arrow Paradox, a riddle of motion that has puzzled thinkers for centuries. His aim was to show that our common sense understanding of movement hides contradictions. Motion seems obvious. An arrow reaches its target. A runner crosses the finish line. Yet when we divide time into infinite instants, motion dissolves into stillness. Philosophers and mathematicians wrestled with this paradox. Some argued that motion is an illusion, a trick of perception. Others found answers in the concept of infinity, in the way continuous change defies being broken into static snapshots. Modern calculus offers a resolution, showing how infinite divisions can still yield finite results. And yet, the mystery lingers. The arrow paradox is not only about physics, it is also about our lives. When we break experience into moments, do we lose the flow that makes life what it is? When we freeze time in memory, do we forget that existence is movement, never a still photograph? Level 12 reminds us that life cannot be understood only by fragments. The arrow flies not because of any single instant, but because of the seamless continuity of time. To see only the stillness is to miss the motion. To see only the motion is to forget the stillness within. Level 13. The harmony of the cosmos. Long before telescopes mapped the heavens, philosophers looked upward and felt the universe must sing. The stars wheeled overhead. The moon waxed and waned. The seasons turned in rhythm. The ancients sensed not chaos, but harmony. A hidden order threading through the cosmos. Pythagoras, the mystical mathematician, believed that numbers were the key to this order. He spoke of the music of the spheres, a cosmic symphony beyond human hearing, where planets and stars moved according to mathematical ratios, like strings tuned on an unseen instrument. To him, the universe was not random but beautifully composed. Even today, we glimpse this harmony in the language of science. The laws of physics, the symmetry of equations, the elegance of patterns in nature, all suggest that reality, at its heart, carries a structure that is both rational and mysterious. But the harmony of the cosmos is not only out there, it is within us. The rhythm of breath, the beat of the heart, the balance of mind and body, all mirror the larger symmetries. To live well, many philosophers believed, is to align ourselves with this cosmic order, to find our place in the great song. Level 13 invites us to listen for harmony, where we often hear only noise. Perhaps the universe is not a machine grinding forward, but a melody unfolding, and our task is not to control it, but to join in. To live in harmony is not to erase dissonance, but to recognize that even discord has its place in the music of the whole. Level 14. The idea of the soul. From the dawn of thought, humans have wondered, what is it that makes us who we are? Beneath the body, beneath the mind, is there something more? This is the question of the soul. Plato imagined the soul as immortal, descending into bodies, forgetting its divine knowledge, and striving to return to the realm of truth. For him, the soul was the essence of identity, the spark of eternity within the mortal frame. Others, like Aristotle, saw the soul as the form of the body, not separate but the very principle of life that organizes flesh into a living being. Later traditions, religious and philosophical, gave their own visions, some seeing the soul as a traveler beyond death, others as an illusion created by thought. The idea of the soul is not only a metaphysical question, but a deeply personal one. When we love, we feel it in our souls. When we grieve, the loss touches something beyond the material. The language of soul speaks to the depth of human experience. to the sense that we are more than what can be measured or weighed. Modern thought often reduces the self to brain and body, yet even in science, questions remain about consciousness, identity, and the mystery of inner life. The word soul still lingers, carrying the weight of our longing for meaning beyond matter. Level 14 does not answer what the soul is. It simply reminds us that to be human is to feel a depth that cannot be reduced to parts, whether eternal or fleeting. The soul is the name we give to that depth, the flame that makes us more than shadows in passing. Level 15. Knowledge versus opinion. We live surrounded by voices. Some speak with conviction, some with doubt. But not every voice offers the same weight. This difference between knowledge and opinion lies at the heart of philosophy. Plato drew the line clearly. Opinion, he said, is belief without justification, as fleeting as shadows on the wall. Knowledge, by contrast, is true belief grounded in reason and evidence, tied to what is real and unchanging. To mistake opinion for knowledge is to mistake appearance for truth. In daily life, we often confuse the two. We form opinions from habit, from rumor, from desire. They feel certain, yet crumble under scrutiny. Knowledge demands more. It asks us to test, to question, to seek beyond comfort. It asks us to ground belief in something steady. Yet, even knowledge carries humility. For what we call knowledge today may be overturned tomorrow. Science grows, ideas shift, truths deepen. Perhaps the line between knowledge and opinion is not fixed but moving, always urging us toward greater clarity. For the individual, the distinction matters deeply. To live only by opinion is to drift in uncertainty, swayed by every breeze. To seek knowledge is to build on firmer ground, to walk with steadier steps. Level 15 invites us to hold our opinions lightly, to seek knowledge patiently, and to remember that wisdom lies not in having perfect answers, but in knowing the difference between what is certain and what is not. In that humility, thought becomes a lantern, guiding us through the shadows toward the light. Level 16. The limits of language. Language is the bridge between minds. It allows us to share thoughts, to name the world, to carve experience into words. Yet, language also binds us, for every word reveals, and every word conceals. Wittgenstein once wrote, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." What we cannot put into words often slips beyond our grasp. We can sense it, feel it, but struggle to name it. And in naming, we may distort it, narrowing what was once vast into something too small. Consider love. A single word holds countless shades: tenderness, desire, devotion, friendship. Yet when we say love, all those subtleties collapse into one fragile sign. The word both connects and limits. It points, but it never captures. Mystics and poets have long sensed this gap. Some fall silent, trusting that silence speaks truer than speech. Others twist words into paradox, hoping to stretch them beyond their edges. Still, the problem remains. Language is a net, and reality is water. Level 16 invites us to reflect on what words cannot do. To live within language is to live within boundaries. But to sense its limits is to remember that life itself is always larger. Sometimes the most honest response is silence, the pause that acknowledges the ineffable. In this silence, we glimpse a truth beyond words. Level 17. Skepticism and the quest for certainty. What can we truly know? The skeptic whispers, perhaps nothing. For every belief we hold, a doubt can be raised. The senses deceive. Memory falters. Reason contradicts itself. Certainty, the skeptic warns, may be nothing but illusion. Ancient skeptics like Pyrrho lived by suspending judgment, finding peace not in truth, but in the absence of dogma. To them, the constant struggle to prove or disprove was a trap. By letting go of certainty, they found a strange calm, like drifting on the sea without fighting the waves. Later thinkers wrestled with skepticism's challenge. Descartes doubted everything until only one truth remained, that he was doubting. and therefore thinking, and therefore existing. Others sought foundations in reason, in science, in shared experience. Yet the skeptic's question never disappears. How do we know that what we see, hear, or believe is not mistaken? In daily life, skepticism has a role. It keeps us from being deceived, from trusting too quickly, from mistaking shadow for substance. Yet too much skepticism leaves us paralyzed, unable to act, unable to believe anything at all. Level 17 is a reminder that certainty may always be beyond us. But this does not mean we must despair. To live wisely is to balance doubt and trust, to question deeply, but also to move forward when enough clarity has been found. In the dance between skepticism and belief, we walk the path of thought. Level 18, the problem of universals. When we say tree, we can mean an oak, a pine, or a birch. Each is different. Yet the word gathers them into one idea. But where does this treeness exist? Is it something real, or only a name? This is the problem of universals, a debate that stretches across centuries. Plato argued that universals are real. Beyond every particular thing lies a perfect form, the ideal tree, the ideal beauty, the ideal good. What we see are only shadows of these eternal patterns. Aristotle disagreed. He placed universals not in a separate realm, but within things themselves. The idea of treeness exists only in trees, not apart from them. Later philosophers debated endlessly. Are universals real? Or are they just words we use to group things together? The problem may seem abstract, but it shapes how we think about truth. If universals are real, then perhaps there are eternal standards for justice, beauty, and goodness. If they are only names, then meaning is fragile, shifting with use and culture. Level 18 brings us face to face with the tension between the particular and the universal. Every rose is unique, yet somehow each still belongs to the category rose. We live in the pull of both, the singular and the shared. Perhaps universals are less about objects than about the mind's need to weave patterns, to see the one in the many. Level 19, dreams and reality. When you dream, the world feels real. You walk through streets, speak with friends, feel fear or joy. Only upon waking do you realize it was illusion. But what if life itself is such a dream? How can we ever be sure? Philosophers have long asked this unsettling question. Descartes wondered whether all his experiences might be illusions cast by a powerful deceiver. The Chinese sage Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly, and upon waking, asked whether he was a man who dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming of being a man. The line between dreams and reality is thinner than we think. Our senses construct the world moment by moment, weaving signals into a story. If those signals were different, if we were dreaming, hallucinating, or living in a simulation, would we notice? Yet even if reality is uncertain, our experience is real to us. The joy, the sorrow, the wonder of a dream lingers even after waking. In that sense, dreams are not false, but another mode of reality, another way the mind shapes its world. Level 19 reminds us to treat waking life with the same curiosity we bring to dreams. What feels solid may not be ultimate. What feels fleeting may still carry truth. Perhaps life and dream are not opposites, but companions, each revealing the fragility and mystery of perception. Level 20, the nature of time. Time is the river we all drift upon. It carries us from birth to death, from moment to moment, never pausing, never turning back. Yet what is time, truly? Augustine confessed that when no one asks, he knows what time is, but when he tries to explain, he no longer knows. Is time an objective reality, flowing independently of us? Or is it a construct of the mind, a way of ordering change? Some philosophers argue that only the present exists. The past is gone, the future not yet real. Others claim that past, present, and future all coexist in a vast block universe, and that our sense of flow is merely perspective. Physics deepens the puzzle. Relativity shows that time bends and stretches, tied to speed and gravity, no longer absolute. For us, the mystery is intimate. We feel time in memory, in anticipation, in the fleeting now that always slips away. We long to hold it still, yet it rushes forward. In its flow, we find both beauty and grief, the preciousness of moments and the inevitability of loss. Level 20 invites us to sit with time not as a problem to solve, but as a mystery to inhabit, whether linear or illusory, eternal or fleeting. Time shapes our every breath. To reflect on time is to reflect on life itself, and in that reflection, we glimpse the depth of being. Level 21. Augustine and the Restless Heart. St. Augustine lived in a time of turmoil, yet his deepest struggle was within himself. He searched for pleasure, for ambition, for wisdom in philosophy, but nothing stilled the longing he carried. At last he confessed, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." For Augustine, the human heart is a wanderer. It seeks happiness in fleeting things, wealth, power, lust, praise, yet remains unsatisfied. Beneath every desire is a deeper hunger, a longing for something infinite, something unchanging. He called this longing the soul's thirst for God, even if one does not share Augustine's faith. His insight lingers. We all know the restlessness of chasing one thing after another, only to find the joy fades. It is not that the world's gifts are meaningless, but that they cannot fully satisfy. They point beyond themselves, like signposts to something more enduring. Augustine's restless heart is our own. It asks whether fulfillment lies not in constant pursuit, but in stillness, in grounding, in aligning with what is eternal, whether we name it God, truth, love, or meaning. The shape of the longing is the same. Level 21 invites us to listen to our restlessness, not as a flaw, but as a guide. The ache within us may be the compass of the soul, pointing toward the horizon of what we most deeply seek. Level 22, Aquinas and the Proofs of God. Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval thinker, sought to bring faith and reason together. He did not believe in blind belief. Instead, he asked, can we know God through reason itself? He offered 5 ways, arguments that still echo through philosophy. The first was motion. Everything that moves is moved by something else, and so there must be a first mover, unmoved. The second was cause. Every effect has a cause, and tracing back leads to a first cause. The third was contingency. The things we see might not have existed, so there must be a necessary being whose existence is not optional. The fourth was gradation. Our sense of better and worse points to a highest standard of goodness. The fifth was design. The order of the world suggests an intelligent guide. These arguments do not compel like mathematical proofs. They are more like pathways, offering ways of seeing. Critics challenge them, pointing to science, to chance, to alternate explanations. Yet the power of Aquinas' reasoning lies not in certainty, but in its invitation to think, to wonder whether reason itself points beyond reason. Level 22 reminds us that philosophy is not only about doubt, but also about seeking foundations, whether or not one accepts his proofs. Aquinas offers a vision where faith and reason are not enemies, but companions, walking side by side in the search for truth. Level 23, the question of evil. If the world was made by a good and all-powerful being, why is there suffering? This question, the problem of evil, has haunted philosophy and theology alike. The problem is stark. If God is all-powerful, he could prevent evil. If God is perfectly good, he would want to prevent evil. Yet evil exists. How can this be reconciled? Some argued that evil is not a substance, but a lack, a shadow where good is absent. Others said that free will requires the possibility of evil. Without it, we would be puppets, not persons. Still others saw suffering as a test, a refinement, or a mystery beyond human grasp. But the question does not remain abstract. It lives in grief, in injustice, in the quiet cry of those who suffer without reason. Philosophy here is not only a game of logic, but a struggle of the heart. Level 23 does not erase the problem of evil, instead. It reminds us that facing suffering is part of the philosophical journey. Whether one finds solace in theology, in human resilience, or in the acceptance of life's tragic depth, the question remains a mirror of our own compassion. To wrestle with evil is to wrestle with what it means to be human. Level 24, Renaissance Humanism. After centuries shaped by faith and theology, a new spirit rose in Europe, the spirit of humanism, the Renaissance, a rebirth of art and thought, turned its gaze not only to God, but also to the dignity and worth of the human being. Thinkers like Pico della Mirandola celebrated human freedom and potential. Humanity, they said, was not bound to one fixed place, but capable of shaping itself. In art, the human form returned to center stage, painted and sculpted with reverence. In science, curiosity about the natural world grew bold again. In literature, voices spoke of love, beauty, and individual experience with renewed depth. Renaissance humanism did not reject the divine, but sought to honor the human as divine in its own way. It reminded people that reason, creativity, and expression are themselves sacred gifts. The world was not merely a place of exile, but a canvas for discovery and joy. Level 24 is a celebration of humanity's power to create, to imagine, to shape meaning. It reminds us that to be human is not only to question, but also to build, to paint, to write, to love. The Renaissance whispers still, we are not small in the cosmos, we are creators within it. Level 25, Descartes and I think, therefore I am. René Descartes sat in doubt. Everything, he realized, could be questioned. The senses deceive, dreams feel real. Perhaps even a powerful deceiver could be tricking him at every turn. What, then, could not be doubted? At last, he reached a single point of certainty, even if he was deceived, even if everything else was false. The very act of doubting proved he existed. Cogito, ergo sum, he wrote. I think, therefore I am. From this foundation, Descartes sought to rebuild knowledge. If the mind could not be doubted, then perhaps reason could extend outward, grounding science and philosophy in clear and distinct ideas. His project shaped the course of modern thought, giving birth to a new emphasis on subjectivity, on the self as the starting point of knowledge. Yet his conclusion also opens deeper questions. If the self is certain, what of the world beyond it? If thought proves existence, what of being without thought? The cogito secures a foothold, but also narrows the ground. Level 25 reminds us that philosophy often begins in doubt, but it does not end there. Doubt clears the ground. But the question of what we can truly know remains. Descartes' simple statement is more than logic. It is a reminder that awareness itself is undeniable. That in the act of thinking, we are. Level 26, the mind-body problem. When you raise your hand, it feels simple. A thought arises, and the body obeys. But how does thought, something invisible and immaterial, cause the body, something physical, to move? This is the mystery known as the mind-body problem. Descartes sharpened the puzzle. He believed the mind and body were two distinct substances, mind, the realm of thought, body, the realm of matter. Yet if they are separate, how do they touch? How does an idea give rise to motion, or a bruise give rise to pain? Philosophers have offered countless answers. Some argue for dualism, holding mind and body apart. Others claim only matter exists, that consciousness is simply the brain at work. Still others insist only mind is real, and the body is but its projection. Each view carries difficulties, yet none resolves the riddle completely. The mind-body problem is not only theoretical, it is lived. We feel emotions flood into the body, fear quickening the heart, sorrow weighing on the chest. We feel the body shape the mind, hunger narrowing thought, illness clouding clarity. The two are woven together, inseparable. Yet their union remains a mystery. Level 26 reminds us that to be human is to live in this tension. We are not only flesh, not only thought, but something that bridges both. The puzzle may never be solved, but in living it, we touch the wonder of what it means to be alive. Level 27. Locke and the Blank Slate. John Locke imagined the mind at birth as a blank slate, a sheet of unwritten parchment. No innate ideas, no preformed truths, only potential. Experience, he said, is the pen that writes upon it. Sensation and reflection carve the self, shaping knowledge through the steady accumulation of impressions. This vision of the blank slate was revolutionary. It challenged the belief that humans are born with fixed ideas of God, morality, or truth instead. Locke saw knowledge as a gradual construction, rooted in experience. From sight and sound, from touch and thought, we build the architecture of the mind. The idea carries great hope. If minds are blank at birth, then education can transform. Learning, environment, and culture can uplift, refine, and expand human possibility. But it also raises questions. If we are only what experience makes us, do we have any freedom beyond circumstance? Can the slate ever truly be erased? Modern science complicates Locke's vision. We now know that genes, instincts, and biology shape us from the beginning. Yet the blank slate still whispers truth, that we are deeply formed by what we encounter, that growth and change remain possible throughout life. Level 27 invites us to see the mind not as a fixed vessel, but as a canvas. Though not empty, it is never finished. Each moment writes upon it, and each choice shapes the script. To live is to continue the writing, to remain open to the ever-unfolding story. Level 28, the social contract. Imagine humans before society, wandering, free, without rulers or laws. Life might be simple, yet it might also be harsh, filled with conflict. From this thought experiment arises the question, why do we form governments? The answer, philosophers suggested, lies in a social contract. Hobbes saw the state of nature as brutal, a war of all against all. To escape this chaos, people agreed to surrender some freedom to a sovereign, trading liberty for security. For him, the contract was survival's price. Locke envisioned it differently. He believed humans in nature possessed rights to life, liberty, and property. Governments, then, exist not to dominate, but to protect these rights. If rulers fail, the contract is broken, and people may resist. Rousseau, in turn, saw the contract as a means of collective freedom. By agreeing together, individuals could form a general will, living not as isolated beings, but as a community shaping its destiny. The social contract is not a document we signed, yet it underlies every society. It asks why we obey laws, why we recognize authority, why we bind ourselves to rules. Level 28 reminds us that freedom and order are not opposites, but companions. We give up some freedom to gain greater peace, but in doing so, we must always ask, is the contract fair? Does it serve the people? To reflect on the social contract is to reflect on justice itself, and on the kind of world we wish to build together. Level 29, Hobbes and the state of nature. Thomas Hobbes looked at the raw condition of humanity and saw danger. Without government, he argued, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. In the state of nature, each person's survival would be threatened by every other's strength and ambition. Fear of death, Hobbes believed, drives humans to seek order, to escape the endless war of all against all. They agree to a sovereign power, a leviathan, vast and strong, to impose peace. In this vision, authority is not born of trust but of necessity, a wall against chaos. Critics object that Hobbes painted human nature too darkly, Are we truly so violent, so selfish without laws? Yet his vision reveals a truth about vulnerability. Without bonds of trust, without rules or protections, every life stands exposed, fragile in the face of others. The state of nature remains a haunting image, not only of the past, but of what can resurface when order collapses. Wars, anarchy, and lawlessness remind us how thin the fabric of society can be. Level 29 does not ask us to accept Hobbes's bleak vision fully, but to consider the cost of peace. Authority restrains, but it also secures. Freedom narrows, but survival expands. The state of nature lingers at the edges of every society, a shadow that warns us why we bind ourselves together. Level 30, Rousseau and the Noble Savage. Where Hobbes saw violence, Rousseau saw innocence. He imagined early humans as noble savages, free, simple, living in harmony with nature. In this state, people were guided by compassion and basic needs, uncorrupted by greed or ambition. It was civilization, he argued, that introduced inequality, pride, and injustice. For Rousseau, the chains of society were not only political, but moral. The more humans compared themselves to others, the more envy and competition grew. What began as natural freedom hardened into social bondage. His call was not to return to the wild, but to reform society so it served human flourishing rather than corrupting it. The Noble Savage is not a historical claim, but a metaphor. It asks us to imagine what humanity is without artifice, to consider whether our deepest nature is violent, as Hobbes claimed, or gentle, as Rousseau believed. Modern anthropology complicates both visions, showing early life to be a mix of cooperation and conflict. Yet Rousseau's idea still stirs us, reminding us that much of our suffering is not inevitable, but constructed. Poverty, inequality, exploitation. These are not nature's laws, but human inventions. Level 30 invites us to reflect on civilization's double edge. It refines, but it also corrupts. It creates art, science, and culture, but also greed and oppression. Rousseau whispers that freedom lies not in abandoning society, but in reshaping it. To become noble again is not to flee into the forests, but to awaken compassion within the structures we build. Level 31. The Paradox of Tolerance. Tolerance is often praised as a virtue, the ability to live peacefully with differences. Yet Karl Popper pointed out a troubling paradox. If a society is endlessly tolerant, even of intolerance, then intolerance will eventually destroy it. To preserve tolerance, we may be forced to refuse tolerance to the intolerant. This paradox cuts deep. To allow every voice, even those that deny the freedom of others, risks silencing freedom itself. Yet, to restrict voices feels like betraying tolerance, the very value we claim to defend. The balance is fragile, like walking a narrow bridge between chaos and oppression. We see this paradox not only in politics, but in personal life. When kindness is met with cruelty, when openness is exploited, when patience is used as a weapon against us, what then? Do we continue to tolerate, or do we draw a line? The paradox of tolerance asks us to distinguish between acceptance and surrender. Tolerance is not indifference. It is a choice to coexist, but it cannot be limitless. For limitless tolerance dissolves the very ground it stands upon. Level 31 reminds us that virtues live in tension. To be tolerant is noble, but to protect tolerance requires courage, boundaries, and the wisdom to know when tolerance must end. Level 32, Hume and the Problem of Induction. David Hume looked at the way we reason and uncovered a quiet riddle. We believe the sun will rise tomorrow because it has always risen before. We expect bread to nourish us because it has nourished us in the past. But what justifies this leap from past to future? Hume called this the problem of induction. Induction means drawing general laws from repeated experiences. Yet reason alone cannot guarantee that the future must resemble the past. It is only habit, expectation, the mind's tendency to assume continuity. This insight shook philosophy. If our knowledge rests on induction, and induction rests only on habit, then certainty dissolves. Science itself relies on the assumption that patterns endure, yet Hume showed that assumption to be unproven. Still, we live by induction every day. We trust that water will quench, that fire will burn, that gravity will hold. Without such trust, action would be impossible. Perhaps certainty is not given, but probability guides us well enough. Level 32 does not solve the problem, but reveals its weight. It reminds us that knowledge is fragile, that beneath our confidence lies a leap of faith. To live is to step forward without guarantee, trusting that the road ahead will echo the steps behind. Level 33. The self as a bundle of perceptions. When you look within, what do you find? A single, solid self, or a shifting stream of sensations, thoughts, and feelings? Hume argued that the self is not a substance, but a bundle of perceptions. At no moment do we encounter a pure I instead. We find impressions flowing, sight, sound, memory, desire, woven together by habit into the illusion of a stable identity. This vision is unsettling. If the self is only a bundle, who am I? Where is the soul? The permanent center. Yet it also brings freedom. If the self is not fixed, then it can change. It is not a prison, but a river, always moving, always open to transformation. Eastern philosophies echo this insight. Buddhism speaks of anatta, the doctrine of no self, where clinging to a permanent identity is the root of suffering. To release it is to awaken. Level 33 invites us to see identity as fluid, not rigid. The self is a story, a thread woven across time, held together by memory and desire. To recognize this is not to lose ourselves, but to live more lightly, less bound by the illusion of permanence. Level 34. Kant and the categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant sought a foundation for morality beyond desire, culture, or circumstance. He found it in the idea of duty, expressed in what he called the categorical imperative. Act, he said, only according to that principle which you could will to become a universal law. This test asks us to step beyond self-interest. If lying would be wrong for all, then it is wrong for me, even when convenient. If breaking promises would destroy trust universally, then I must keep mine. Morality, for Kant, is not about consequences, but about consistency, dignity, and respect for reason itself. The categorical imperative is demanding. It strips away excuses, forcing us to ask, would I accept this action as universal? In doing so, it honors every person as an end in themselves, never merely a means to another's gain. Critics argue that Kant's vision is too rigid, blind to context. Yet his voice endures, reminding us that morality must rise higher than whim. It must rest on principles that treat humanity with reverence. Level 34 asks us to test our lives by this measure. Would I will this act for all? If not, can I still call it right? In this question, Kant offers not certainty, but a compass for conscience. Level 35, the sublime and moral awe. Kant also spoke of the sublime, that feeling of awe we experience before vastness, power, or infinity, standing before towering mountains, endless oceans, or the starry sky. We feel both small and elevated, overwhelmed by greatness, yet lifted beyond ourselves. For Kant, the sublime reveals the dignity of reason. Nature may dwarf us, yet within, we sense the capacity to think the infinite, to grasp moral law. The sublime humbles and exalts at once, reminding us of our place and our power. This feeling is not limited to landscapes. We feel it in acts of moral greatness, sacrifice, courage, love that defies calculation. In these moments, we glimpse a beauty that is more than pleasure, an awe that moves the soul. Level 35 invites us to seek the sublime in both nature and life, to stand before vastness, not in fear, but in wonder, to feel small, yet to recognize that even in our smallness, we are capable of thought, of choice, of morality, in awe. We find humility. In humility, we find greatness. Level 36, the thing in itself. Immanuel Kant distinguished between the world as it appears to us and the world as it is in itself. What we experience, he said, is shaped by the categories of our mind: space, time, causality. These are not properties of the world, but lenses through which we perceive it. Beyond these appearances lies the thing in itself, reality as it truly is, independent of our perception. Yet Kant insisted we can never know it directly. We see only the filtered image, never the source. This distinction is both humbling and liberating. It humbles us, for it means our knowledge is never complete, no matter how much science advances. We grasp only phenomena, never noumena, yet it liberates us, for it reminds us that reality is richer than what we can measure or explain. The thing in itself is like the hidden face of the moon. We glimpse its influence, but its essence remains concealed. It whispers that the world holds depths beyond our reach. Level 36 invites us to live with this mystery, to know that what we see is not all that is, to accept the limits of perception without despair, for within those limits, wonder expands. The unknowable calls us not to mastery, but to awe. Level 37, reason versus emotion. Within us live two voices. One is reason, clear and deliberate, weighing evidence, seeking order. The other is emotion, immediate and powerful, moving us to act before thought can catch up. Philosophers have long debated which voice should rule. The Stoics urged reason to master passion, seeing emotion as turbulence clouding judgment. David Hume countered that reason alone cannot move us, that it is always the servant of passion. Modern thought leans toward balance, recognizing that emotion and reason are not enemies but partners. Reason guides us toward truth, but emotion gives truth its weight. Without reason, passion becomes chaos. Without passion, reason becomes lifeless, unable to stir the will. Together, they shape human action. Like two currents meeting to form a river in daily life, we feel this tension. Anger may urge us to speak, while reason counsels silence. Compassion may move us to act where logic alone would hesitate. Neither voice is complete without the other. Level 37 reminds us that wisdom is not reason without emotion, nor emotion without reason, but their harmony. To live well is to think with the heart and feel with the mind, weaving clarity and passion into a single fabric of being. Level 38, the paradox of enlightenment. The Enlightenment promised liberation through reason, with knowledge. Superstition would fall, with science. Progress would unfold, with rational laws. Society would flourish. And yet, from this very era of reason arose new forms of domination, new ways for humanity to enslave itself. Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno called this the paradox of enlightenment. Reason, when reduced to mere calculation, can become a tool of control. It can strip the world of mystery, reduce people to numbers, and turn progress into machinery that serves power. The very light that frees can also blind. This paradox is not a rejection of reason, but a warning. When reason forgets its roots in wonder, when it becomes only efficiency without wisdom, it betrays itself. True enlightenment is not cold logic, but the union of knowledge with humanity, compassion and humility. Level 38 invites us to reflect on the double edge of reason. It can liberate, but it can also confine. It can uplift, but it can also oppress. To live wisely in the light of reason is to remember that reason must always serve life, not the other way around. Level 39, the birth of modern science. In the 17th century, a new vision of the world emerged. Galileo turned his telescope to the heavens and saw moons circling Jupiter, challenging ancient cosmology. Newton described gravity not as a mystical force, but as a law, precise and universal. The birth of modern science reshaped not only knowledge, but the very way humans saw themselves. Where once the world was explained through myth or authority, now observation and experiment took center stage. Nature became a book to be read, its patterns revealed in numbers and equations. Certainty no longer rested in tradition, but in method. This revolution brought immense power. The ability to predict, to measure, to harness nature transformed human life. Yet it also raised new questions. If the universe is governed by laws, where is freedom? If the cosmos is mechanical, where is meaning? Level 39 invites us to see science not as the end of philosophy, but as its companion. Science shows us how the world works, but philosophy asks why it matters. The birth of modern science was also the birth of new wonder. A reminder that knowledge expands not to replace mystery, but to deepen it. Level 40, the idea of progress. Linked to science and reason came the idea of progress. The belief that humanity could continually improve, that the future would be brighter than the past, through education, technology, and social reform. People imagined a steady ascent toward perfection. This idea brought hope. It fueled revolutions, inspired reforms, and gave meaning to struggle. To believe in progress was to believe that suffering was not destiny, but a challenge to be overcome. Yet progress, too, has its shadows. The 20th century saw wars and atrocities committed in the name of advancement. Technology gave us medicine, but also weapons. Industry lifted many from poverty, but also scarred the earth. Progress is not guaranteed. It is fragile, uneven, and sometimes illusory. Still, the dream endures. We plant, we build, we teach, trusting that tomorrow can be better than today, even in despair. The idea of progress whispers possibility. Level 40 invites us to hold progress with both hope and caution, to recognize its promise, but not to worship it blindly. Progress is not an inevitable march, but a fragile path, requiring wisdom to guide it. True progress may not be faster machines or greater wealth, but deeper compassion, justice, and harmony. Level 41, Hegel and the Dialectic. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel believed that history is not random, but a process of unfolding reason. At its heart lies the dialectic, a movement of thought where contradiction does not destroy, but creates. Every idea, or thesis, encounters its opposite, the antithesis. Their conflict gives rise to a synthesis, a higher unity that preserves both yet transcends them. This pattern, he believed, shapes not only philosophy, but history itself. Through struggle, humanity advances. Through contradiction, spirit unfolds. The dialectic is not neat or linear. It is messy, painful, filled with conflict and misunderstanding. Yet Hegel saw in it a hidden order, a rationality weaving through the chaos of events. Even wars, revolutions, and failures become steps in a larger journey toward freedom and self-awareness. For the individual, the dialectic mirrors our own growth. We hold beliefs, face challenges that shatter them, then rebuild on a deeper ground. Each crisis becomes not only an ending, but also a beginning. Level 41 reminds us that contradiction is not the enemy of truth, but its engine. To live dialectically is to embrace tension, to see in every conflict the seed of new understanding. History and life alike move not in circles, but in spirals, ever deepening, ever unfolding. Level 42, the master-slave dynamic. In his Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel described the struggle for recognition, a drama between master and slave. At first, the master appears powerful, commanding labor and obedience, yet the slave, through work, transforms the world and himself, gaining skills and self-consciousness. Slowly, the balance shifts. The master depends on the slave more than the slave depends on the master. This dynamic reveals a paradox. Domination is unstable. For true recognition cannot be forced. To be seen as free, one must recognize the freedom of the other. Power without respect becomes hollow. The master-slave dialectic echoes across history, in empires, in revolutions, in social struggles for dignity. It also lives within us. Parts of ourselves try to dominate others. Yet growth comes not through suppression, but through mutual recognition. Level 42 invites us to see freedom not as solitary power, but as shared acknowledgement. To be fully human is to be seen, and to see others in their humanity. Domination may win obedience, but only recognition grants dignity. Level 43, Marx and Alienation. Karl Marx, influenced by Hegel, turned his gaze to the material world. He saw workers laboring in factories, their effort shaping wealth, yet their lives drained of meaning. He called this alienation, the estrangement of humans from their work, from each other, and from themselves. In a healthy life, work can be creative, an expression of human potential. But under systems that exploit, work becomes mechanical, repetitive, disconnected from purpose. The worker does not own the product, nor even his time. He becomes a stranger to his own labor, reduced to a cog in a vast machine. Alienation extends beyond economics. Whenever we feel detached from meaning, whenever we sense a gap between who we are and what we do, we touch this experience. It is the ache of being present yet absent, alive yet estranged. Marx's vision was revolutionary, calling for structures where humans could reclaim their creative essence. Whether or not one agrees with his solutions, his diagnosis lingers. Much of modern life risks severing us from what makes us fully alive. Level 43 asks us to notice where alienation hides in our own lives. Where do we feel estranged? Where does labor become lifeless? And how might we reclaim work as expression, connection, and creation? In these questions, philosophy becomes not only critique, but a call to renewal. Level 44, Nietzsche and the Death of God. Friedrich Nietzsche declared, "God is dead." He did not mean a deity had literally perished, but that the modern world had lost its faith in divine authority. Science, secularism, and reason had eroded belief, leaving humanity without its former anchor. But Nietzsche's words were not triumph, but warning. Without God, who would define morality? Without an absolute, would values collapse into emptiness, leaving only nihilism? The sense that life is meaningless? Yet within this crisis, Nietzsche saw possibility. The death of God cleared the ground for new creation. Humanity could no longer lean on external authority, but must forge its own values, becoming creators rather than followers. Out of the abyss of meaninglessness, a new spirit could rise. This vision is unsettling, for it demands responsibility. No longer can we point outward for meaning, we must shape it within. It is both burden and freedom, both danger and promise. Level 44 reminds us that endings are also beginnings. The death of old certainties need not be despair, but a call to courage. In the silence left by God, Nietzsche invites us to become authors of our own lives, to carve meaning where none is given. Level 45, Eternal Return. Nietzsche asked us to imagine this. What if every moment of your life, every joy and sorrow, every choice and regret, were to repeat again and again, eternally? Would you curse this fate, or would you embrace it with a resounding yes? This thought experiment, the eternal return, is not about cosmology, but about affirmation. If life were to repeat eternally, could we still say it is worth living? To love life is not only to accept its pleasures, but also its pains, its mistakes, its fleetingness. The eternal return tests the weight of our choices. Do we live in such a way that we could bear their repetition forever? Or do we shrink from them, wishing to erase what cannot be erased? Nietzsche's challenge is radical. It asks us to live not lightly, as though life were disposable, but deeply, as though every moment carries infinite significance. To affirm life fully is to embrace even its suffering, to see beauties even in its tragedies. Level 45 whispers this question: if life came again, would you welcome it? The eternal return is not prophecy but mirror. It reflects the depth of our love for existence, asking us whether we live in despair or in affirmation. Level 46, the will to power. For Nietzsche, beneath all appearances of morality, culture, and thought lies a deeper force, the will to power. This is not merely the desire for dominance, but the fundamental drive of life to grow, to expand, to express itself. Every being, he argued, seeks not just survival, but flourishing. Plants reach for the sun, artists push boundaries of form, thinkers break old ideas to create new ones. Life is will to power, a restless energy striving to overcome limits. Nietzsche contrasted this vitality with what he called slave morality, values born from weakness, resentment, and fear, which disguise powerlessness as virtue. To embrace the will to power is to affirm strength, creativity, and courage, not in cruelty, but in self-overcoming. This idea is unsettling, for it strips away illusions of stability. It asks us to see beneath comfort and convention, to recognize that all life is struggle, not in violence alone, but in creation, in transformation. Level 46 reminds us that power is not only domination, but the energy to become more. The will to power is the will to live fully, to grow beyond who we were yesterday. To awaken it is to step into life's ceaseless movement, where every moment is a chance to overcome. Level 47, Schopenhauer and the Pessimistic Will. Arthur Schopenhauer saw the world not as rational order, but as blind striving. At the heart of existence, he said, is the will, not reason, not morality, but an endless, insatiable drive. This will pushes life forward, yet it never rests, never satisfies. For Schopenhauer, suffering arises from this will. Desire leads to longing, longing to struggle, satisfaction to boredom, and boredom back to desire again. The cycle never ends, and so life is filled with discontent. Yet his philosophy was not only despair. Schopenhauer believed there were moments of escape, when beauty seizes us, when music lifts us beyond ourselves, when compassion softens the will's harsh grip. In these moments, we glimpse peace, freed for a time from endless striving. He admired those who renounced desire, who sought quietude, even ascetic withdrawal, echoing Eastern traditions of Buddhism and Hinduism. For him, salvation lay not in feeding the will, but in silencing it. Level 47 invites us to listen to our own desires. How often do they leave us restless? How often do we chase what fades as soon as we hold it? Schopenhauer whispers that peace is not in more but in less, in stepping back, in seeing through the restless will, in finding stillness amid striving. Level 48, Kierkegaard and the Leap of Faith. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, wrestled with the limits of reason. He saw that life's greatest truths, love, commitment, faith, cannot be proven logically. They demand a leap, a movement beyond certainty into trust. For Kierkegaard, faith was not the calm possession of truth, but a trembling leap into paradox, to believe in God, to love another, to choose deeply. All require risk, the willingness to step without guarantee. Without this leap, life remains shallow, trapped in hesitation. He warned of the aesthetic life, where one drifts among pleasures and diversions, never committing, never risking. True existence, he argued, requires decision. To live authentically is to leap, to bind oneself to something larger than calculation. The leap of faith is not blind ignorance, but courage. It is the acceptance that reason cannot carry us all the way, that at the edge of thought, choice remains. Level 48 reminds us that life's most important steps are not proven, but chosen. To love is to leap, to trust is to leap, to believe is to leap, and in that leap, fragile and uncertain. Existence finds its depth. Level 49, Existential Freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre declared that humans are condemned to be free. Unlike objects, we are not fixed by essence. We must choose, inventing ourselves through our actions. This freedom is both gift and burden. We cannot escape it. Even refusing to choose is itself a choice. Every moment presses upon us the responsibility of creating meaning, for no meaning is given beforehand. Sartre called this radical freedom, the inescapable responsibility of existence. Yet freedom also terrifies. With no eternal blueprint, we face what he called anguish. The weight of knowing that the shape of our lives rests on us alone. Many flee this responsibility, hiding in roles, routines, or excuses, what Sartre named bad faith. But to live authentically is to embrace freedom, to accept the anxiety it brings, and to act with full awareness that our choices define us. Level 49 is a reminder that freedom is not merely liberty from chains, but the power to shape existence. It asks whether we live by default or by decision. To awaken to freedom is to awaken to the profound truth that we are always, endlessly, authors of ourselves. Level 50, Dostoevsky and the Underground Man. In Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, a strange voice speaks, a man bitter, self-contradictory, defiant. He rejects reason, mocks progress, and revels in his own misery. This underground man embodies the rebellion against systems that claim to define human nature. Rationalists of his time believed human behavior could be predicted, managed, improved through reason. But the underground man insists on his freedom. Even if it means choosing against his own interest, he would rather suffer than be reduced to a predictable machine. His spite is his proof of humanity. This figure reveals a dark side of freedom, the desire not only to flourish, but to resist control, to assert individuality even through self-destruction. He embodies the contradictions of the human spirit, longing for meaning, yet sabotaging it, craving connection, yet isolating himself. Level 50 invites us to hear this unsettling voice within. How often do we act against reason? Not because we are ignorant, but because we wish to prove we are free. The underground man reminds us that humanity cannot be simplified into neat systems. We are creatures of paradox, sometimes choosing pain over order, chaos over certainty, simply to assert that we are alive. Level 51, The Absurd, Camus. Albert Camus wrote that life confronts us with the absurd, the clash between our longing for meaning and the silence of the universe. We seek order, purpose, and reason, yet the world gives us none. This tension does not resolve, it simply is. Many, he noted, respond by leaping to belief, or by surrendering to despair. But Camus rejected both. To live authentically is to face the absurd without illusion, without escape. It is to see life's lack of ultimate meaning and yet still affirm it, still choose to live. His metaphor was Sisyphus, condemned to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to roll down again. To many, this fate is despair. To Camus, it is freedom. If the universe has no ultimate script, then we are free to write our own, even in endless repetition. Dignity is possible. The absurd asks us to live fully, not because life offers eternal meaning, but because it is fleeting and fragile. To love, to create, to act. Knowing the silence above us is to give life its value. Level 51 reminds us that the absurd is not the end of hope, but the beginning of courage. To embrace the absurd is to affirm life without guarantee, to smile at the futility, and to keep pushing the stone. Level 52. Meaning in a godless world without God. What gives life meaning? This question haunted the 19th and 20th centuries, echoing from Nietzsche to Camus, Sartre, and beyond. If divine authority is gone, are we left adrift in nihilism? Some feared so, without a higher law. Morality seems fragile, truth uncertain, purpose fleeting. Yet others saw freedom in this very absence, if no meaning is given from above, then meaning becomes our task. We become creators, not followers. For Sartre, existence precedes essence. We are not born with a fixed purpose, but must shape ourselves through choice. For Camus, meaning arises in revolt, in living fully despite the silence of the cosmos. For humanists, meaning is found in love, in work, in the bonds we build with others. The loss of external certainty is painful, but it also opens a wider horizon. Life may have no cosmic plan, yet it can be full of human purpose. The laughter of a friend, the beauty of art, the struggle for justice. These do not require eternity to matter. Level 52 invites us to see meaning not as given, but as woven. Every act of kindness, every choice of courage, every moment of joy adds a thread to the tapestry. Godless or not, the world becomes meaningful when we live as though it is. Level 53, Heidegger and Being. Martin Heidegger asked not what things are, but what it means to be. He felt philosophy had forgotten this deepest question. We study objects, ideas, sciences, yet rarely pause to ask, what is the nature of existence itself? He turned to human life, what he called Dasein, being there. We are unique, he said, in that we are aware of our own being. We do not simply exist, we know we exist. And with that awareness comes anxiety, for we sense both possibility and mortality. For Heidegger, to live authentically is to face this finitude, to recognize that our time is limited and our choices define us. To live in denial, distracted by routine and chatter, is to fall into inauthenticity. But to confront death, to live as if each moment were precious, is to awaken to being. His words are dense, but their heart is simple. Life becomes meaningful not by escaping mortality, but by embracing it. Existence shines brighter when seen against its end. Level 53 invites us to reflect not only on things but on being itself, to remember that our lives are not infinite, and that this very limit gives them depth. In the shadow of death, being becomes luminous. Level 54, Authenticity versus Inauthenticity, Heidegger. And later existentialists like Sartre spoke of authenticity, the courage to live one's own life, rather than drifting in the expectations of others. Inauthenticity, by contrast, is when we lose ourselves in the they, what others say, what society demands, what convention prescribes. To be authentic is not to be selfish, but to live consciously, aware of one's freedom, one's mortality, one's responsibility. It is to choose deliberately, even when difficult, rather than to follow blindly. Inauthenticity offers comfort. It allows us to hide in roles and routines, to let life pass without confronting its weight, but it also leaves us hollow. For beneath conformity lies the unasked question, is this truly my life? Authenticity is unsettling, for it demands that we own our choices, yet in that demand lies freedom. The authentic life may not be easier, but it is fuller, more honest, more alive. Level 54 reminds us that existence is not only about living, but about living awake. To be authentic is to step out of the crowd, to listen for the voice within, and to act as though this fleeting life truly belongs to us. Level 55, Sartre and Radical Freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre pressed the existential vision to its edge. We are radically free, he said. There is no essence, no destiny, no divine plan to bind us. We exist first, and then we define ourselves through choice. This freedom is exhilarating, but also terrifying. With no blueprint, no excuses, we bear full responsibility for who we become. Sartre called this anguish, the weight of realizing that every choice creates not only ourselves, but also an example of what humanity can be. Many try to escape this burden by living in bad faith, pretending we are only roles, only victims of circumstance, only objects. But bad faith is self-deception, a flight from freedom. True existence, he argued, requires owning our radical liberty. even when it frightens us. Sartre's vision does not offer comfort, but it does offer dignity. We are not puppets, nor products of fate alone. We are creators, authors of meaning in a universe without given meaning. Level 55 whispers this truth. You are free, whether you wish it or not. Freedom cannot be avoided, only lived or denied. To live it is to accept responsibility, to act with awareness, to create with courage. In this radical freedom lies both the burden and the beauty of being human. Level 56, Bad Faith. Sartre described a subtle danger in human life, bad faith. It is the act of lying to ourselves, of hiding our freedom behind excuses, of pretending we are fixed things rather than free beings.
Consider the waiter who convinces himself he is only a waiter, defined entirely by his role, nothing more. Or the person who blames fate, society, or circumstance for every choice, refusing to see their own responsibility. Bad faith is not ignorance, but evasion. We know we are free, but we fear it, and so we pretend otherwise.
This self-deception is tempting, for freedom is heavy. To acknowledge it is to admit that we alone are responsible for shaping our lives. To live in bad faith is easier. It gives the illusion of certainty, of escape from choice. Yet it leaves us hollow, trapped in denial of what we truly are. Authenticity, by contrast, requires courage. It demands that we own our freedom, even when painful, even when choices carry regret. To act authentically is to accept the burden of being human, to embrace that our lives are never finished but always being made.
Level 56 reminds us that honesty with ourselves is the root of freedom. To shed bad faith is to step into the uncertainty of existence with open eyes, no longer hiding, no longer fleeing. It is to live not as a role, but as a being who chooses. Level 57, Simone de Beauvoir and the Other. Simone de Beauvoir, a voice of existentialism, turned her gaze towards the condition of women. She wrote that woman has often been defined not as herself, but as the other, measured against man, seen as secondary, derivative, incomplete. In the second sex, she declared, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Gender, she argued, is not destiny but a construct, shaped by culture, expectation, and power. To be defined as other is to be denied subjectivity, to be forced into roles that shrink one's freedom. Her philosophy was not only about women, but about all who are cast as other. Whenever one group claims to be the standard of humanity, the rest become shadows, denied the fullness of subjecthood. The struggle for freedom, then, is not only personal, but collective. The fight to be seen as self, not as other. De Beauvoir's words continue to echo in struggles for equality and recognition. They remind us that freedom is never complete while others are denied theirs. Level 57 asks us to reflect on how we see and define one another. Do we grant full subjectivity? Or do we reduce others to roles, categories, or objects? To overcome the other is to affirm humanity in its fullness, in every person's freedom to define themselves. Level 58, The Ethics of Ambiguity.
De Beauvoir also wrote of ambiguity, the condition of human life caught between freedom and limitation, between subject and object, between self and world. We are not pure freedom, nor pure necessity, but a tension between the two. She argued that ethics must begin from this ambiguity. We are free, yet our freedom is shaped by history, by body, by circumstance. To live well is not to deny this tension, but to embrace it, to act within it with responsibility and compassion.
True freedom, she said, is not isolation, but mutual recognition. My freedom flourishes only when others' freedom flourishes too. To will myself free is to will others free, for we are bound together. This vision makes morality not a rigid code, but a living choice. Every act affirms or denies freedom, our own and that of others. The task is endless. without final answers, but carried in every moment of existence.
Level 58 invites us to accept the ambiguity of life, not as weakness, but as depth. We are not gods, nor machines, but beings suspended between. To live ethically is to honor that ambiguity, to act so that freedom grows, both within ourselves and in the world we share. Level 59, the paradox of choice. Modern life often overwhelms with choice. Shops, screens, endless possibilities, each promising happiness, yet each multiplying doubt. Barry Schwartz called this the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the less free we often feel.
Choice can liberate, but too much choice paralyzes. We fear missing out, regret decisions, wonder if something better was left behind. The abundance that was meant to bring joy becomes a burden. This paradox touches not only consumer life, but deeper existence. With freedom comes anxiety, the awareness that every choice excludes others, that we cannot live every possible life. To choose one path is to close countless doors. Yet the paradox also carries wisdom. Freedom is not about infinite options, but about meaningful ones. To choose deeply, with awareness, is better than to drift among endless surfaces. Simplicity can be richer than excess, commitment deeper than endless wandering. Level 59 reminds us that choice is both gift and weight. To embrace freedom is to accept the loss it entails. To live not in fear of missed possibilities, but in fullness of chosen ones. Every path walked fully is a life complete, even if countless others remain untouched. Level 60, the problem of the self. Who am I? This question, ancient and persistent, resists every answer. Am I my body, my thoughts, my memories, my soul? Or am I something beyond all of these? An essence that cannot be captured. Philosophers have given many visions. For Hume, the self was only a bundle of perceptions, fleeting and ungraspable. For Descartes, it was the thinking mind, the cogito that could not be doubted. For Buddhists, it is illusion, a construct born of clinging. For others, it is story, a thread woven across time.
The self is elusive, for it changes. Who we were yesterday is not who we are today. Yet some sense of continuity persists, a center that holds, however fragile. Memory binds us, yet memory also deceives. Identity comforts us, yet identity also confines. The problem of the self is not only abstract, it arises in every moment of reflection. When we say I, who is speaking? When we change, what remains?
Level 60 reminds us that the self may not be a thing to be found, but a mystery to be lived. Perhaps the self is less an object than a verb, not a possession, but a process. To be human is to be a question to oneself. And in that questioning, life finds its depth. Level 61, Wittgenstein and the Limits of Language. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." With these words, he pointed to the limits of language. Philosophy, he believed, often becomes tangled when it tries to speak of what lies beyond words. Language shapes thought, but it also confines it. We speak of time, self, or reality as if words capture them fully. Yet often they slip through. Words can describe, but they cannot always reveal. To mistake language for the world is to confuse the map for the territory. Later, Wittgenstein softened his view. He saw language not as a rigid mirror, but as a collection of games, each with its own rules. To ask what a word means is to ask how it is used. Meaning is not hidden behind language, but lived within it. This insight humbles philosophy. It reminds us that clarity comes not from inventing perfect definitions, but from seeing how words move within life. Language is not absolute. It grows, shifts, adapts. Level 61 invites us to hold words gently. They are tools, not truths. They guide us, but they also mislead. Silence, too, has its wisdom. reminding us that what cannot be said can still be lived, still be felt, still be known. Level 62, Logical Positivism and Verification, in the early 20th century. A group of thinkers known as the Vienna Circle sought to bring philosophy closer to science. They argued that a statement is meaningful only if it can be verified through experience or through logic. This view became known as logical positivism, metaphysics, theology, and speculation about what lies beyond the senses were dismissed as meaningless. To say, God exists or the soul is eternal, they argued, was not false but empty, like a sentence without reference. Only empirical claims or logical truths had weight. This strict vision aimed to clear philosophy of confusion, to ground it in clarity and precision, yet it soon revealed its own weakness. The principle of verification itself could not be verified. By its own rule, it was meaningless. Still, logical positivism left a legacy. It sharpened analysis, encouraged clarity, and deepened philosophy's dialogue with science. Even as its strict form faded, its influence remains in the demand for rigor and in the suspicion of empty speculation. Level 62 reminds us that philosophy walks a line between science and poetry, between precision and wonder. Verification matters, but so does the space beyond it, the questions that cannot be tested yet continue to move the human spirit. Level 63, the liar paradox. Consider the sentence, "This statement is false." If it is true, then it must be false. But if it is false, then it must be true. This is the liar paradox, a riddle as old as language itself. It reveals a fracture at the heart of logic. Statements that refer to themselves can twist into contradictions, creating loops that reason cannot escape. Similar paradoxes arise in mathematics, in computing, in philosophy, wherever systems attempt to describe themselves. Some see the liar as a mere puzzle, a curiosity of words, yet its implications reach far deeper. If logic itself can generate contradictions, then certainty becomes fragile. Systems may always carry within them the seeds of their undoing. In modern times, Gödel's incompleteness theorems echo this insight. Any system complex enough to describe itself will contain truths it cannot prove. The liar paradox is a mirror of this limit, showing that self-reference bends reason into knots. Level 63 reminds us that language is powerful but not flawless, that thought itself can stumble over its own reflection. The liar paradox is not a trick, but a window into the limits of reason, asking us to live with the awareness that not all truths can be neatly captured. Level 64, Russell's paradox. At the dawn of modern logic, Bertrand Russell uncovered a paradox that shook mathematics. Imagine a library that contains all books that do not list themselves. Should the catalogue of that library list itself? If it does, then it should not. If it does not, then it should. This puzzle, called Russell's paradox, revealed contradictions in the very foundations of set theory, the mathematics meant to underpin all others. If a set can contain itself, contradictions arise. If not, how do we define sets at all? The discovery forced mathematics to rebuild its foundations, leading to new systems, axioms, and rules designed to avoid such self-destructive loops. Yet the paradox endures as a reminder that even the most rigorous structures can crack from within. Beyond mathematics, Russell's paradox speaks to human life. When we try to include everything, even ourselves, in a single system, we risk collapse. Self-reference breeds contradictions, whether in logic, identity, or society. Level 64 invites us to humility. Certainty, even in the most precise sciences, is never absolute. Systems are fragile, reason has limits, and paradox lies at the heart of thought itself. To see this is not to despair, but to marvel at the depth and complexity of the mind's attempt to grasp the infinite. Level 65, Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Hier staat Kurt Gödel, a quiet genius of the 20th century, proved a result that shook the foundations of mathematics. He showed that in any consistent system, complex enough to include arithmetic, there are truths that cannot be proven within that system. This was staggering. Mathematicians had dreamed of building a perfect structure, a complete set of rules from which all truths could be derived. Gödel showed this dream was impossible. Either the system is incomplete, leaving truths forever unprovable, or it is inconsistent, allowing contradictions. Completeness and consistency cannot coexist. Gödel's proof echoed the liar paradox, using self-reference to reveal the limits of formal systems. His work did not destroy mathematics, but deepened it, showing that mystery remains even at its core. No matter how far reason stretches, there will always be truths beyond its reach. The implications ripple outward. If even mathematics cannot be complete, what of philosophy, science, or human understanding? Perhaps limitation is not failure, but essence. That the infinite always exceeds the finite. That wonder remains. Level 65 reminds us that certainty is never absolute, that knowledge carries its own boundaries. To see these limits is not defeat, but liberation. For in the incompleteness of reason lies the endless invitation to explore, to question, to marvel at truths that stretch beyond proof. Level 66, the infinite regress. When we ask why, we expect an answer, but each answer leads to another question, and that question to another still. This is the problem of infinite regress. Suppose we ask why the Earth rests in space. We say because of gravity. Then why gravity? Because of the curvature of space-time. Then why does space-time curve? Every explanation seems to demand another explanation, stretching endlessly into the distance. Some find this troubling, fearing that knowledge may never reach a final foundation. If every truth rests on another, then where does the chain end? Must there be a first cause? An unmoved mover? A principle that stops the regress? Or must we accept the infinite, with no final ground beneath our feet? Infinite regress is not only a philosophical puzzle, but a human experience. We search for meaning in life, why we live, why we suffer, why we love. Yet each answer opens another why. Some find comfort in mystery, others in the thought of a final anchor, still others in the beauty of the endless questioning itself. Level 66 invites us to live with this endless ladder of why. Perhaps philosophy is not about reaching the top, but about climbing with wonder, finding meaning not in the final answer, but in the infinite pursuit. Level 67, the simulation hypothesis. What if the world we know is not ultimate reality, but a simulation? Philosophers and scientists have entertained this idea seriously, wondering whether our universe might be a vast program, its laws, the rules of code, its beings digital illusions. Nick Bostrom argued that if civilizations survive long enough to develop powerful computers, they may create countless simulations of conscious beings. If so, the number of simulated realities might far exceed the number of original ones. Statistically, then, it may be more likely that we are simulated than real. The hypothesis is unsettling. It casts doubt on the solidity of matter, the trustworthiness of perception, even the meaning of existence itself. If we are simulations, are we less real? Or does our experience remain real to us, regardless of origin? Yet the idea also echoes older questions. Plato's cave suggested we might see only shadows of reality. Descartes wondered if an evil demon deceives us. The simulation hypothesis is their modern form, born of computers rather than myth. Level 67 invites us not to panic, but to reflect. Even if reality were simulated, the love we feel, the choices we make, the beauty we perceive remain. Perhaps reality is less about what lies beneath and more about how we live within it. Level 68, the mind as a computer. With the rise of technology, philosophers began to see the mind through a new metaphor, the computer. Just as machines process inputs and produce outputs, so too might the brain process information. With thought as computation, this vision gave birth to cognitive science and artificial intelligence, offering models of memory, learning, and reasoning. The mind became software, the brain its hardware. If true, then consciousness itself might one day be simulated, raising questions about whether machines could ever truly think or feel. Yet the metaphor has limits. A computer follows rules precisely, but the mind seems more fluid, more creative, more unpredictable. Consciousness resists reduction, feelings, meaning, and awareness seem to overflow beyond algorithms. Can love be coded? Can beauty be computed? Some argue that the mind is indeed a kind of computer, just unimaginably complex. Others argue that it is more. A mystery no program can capture. Perhaps the metaphor is useful but incomplete, pointing toward part of the truth without enclosing it. Level 68 asks us to reflect on what it means to think. Are we machines of flesh, processing information? Or are we something more, something no model can fully contain? The question remains open, a reminder of the wonder of our own minds. Level 69. The Chinese Room. John Searle offered a thought experiment to challenge the idea that computers can truly understand. Imagine a person locked in a room with a book of instructions. Chinese characters are passed in. And by following the book, the person produces correct responses, passing them back out. To observers, it seems the person understands Chinese, but inside, he understands nothing. Only symbols manipulated by rules. Searle argued that computers are like the room. They process symbols according to programs, but they do not grasp meaning. Syntax is not semantics. A machine may appear to understand, but true understanding requires consciousness, not mere calculation. This argument stirred debate. Some say that if the system as a whole produces understanding, then it does understand. Others agree with Searle that no matter how complex the program, it lacks awareness. The Chinese Room forces us to ask what understanding is. Is it behavior, responding correctly, or is it inner experience? If machines cannot feel meaning, then their intelligence is only imitation. But if intelligence is defined by output, then perhaps imitation is enough. Level 69 leaves us with uncertainty. Whether machines can ever think remains unanswered. Yet in asking, we reflect on ourselves. What does it mean to understand? What is the difference between following rules and truly knowing? The Room is not only about machines, but about the mystery of mind. Level 70, the hard problem of consciousness. Science can map the brain. It can trace neurons firing, chemicals flowing, circuits activating. Yet one question remains. Why does this activity give rise to experience? Why does matter produce mind? This is the hard problem of consciousness. We can explain functions, how the brain processes vision, how it recalls memory, how it controls the body. But explaining why all this feels like something is different. Why does red look vivid? Why does pain hurt? Why does love glow within? No amount of physical description seems to bridge the gap between matter and experience. Some believe the answer lies in future science, that once we understand the brain fully, the mystery will dissolve. Others believe the problem is deeper, that consciousness is not reducible, that it may be a fundamental feature of reality, like space or time. The hard problem confronts us in daily life. Close your eyes and feel awareness itself, the silent witness behind all experience. It cannot be measured or touched, yet it is more certain than any fact of the world. Level 70 invites us to sit with this mystery. Consciousness is both the most familiar and the most elusive of all things. To explore it is to explore ourselves, to wonder at the miracle that matter awakens into mind, that the universe, through us, becomes aware of itself. Level 71, Qualia and Subjective Experience. When you see the color red, when you taste the sweetness of honey, when you feel the sharp sting of pain. There is something it is like to have those experiences. These felt qualities are called qualia. The raw texture of consciousness. Science can explain wavelengths of light, chemical reactions on the tongue, signals traveling through nerves. But none of this explains what it feels like. Why does red feel the way it does? Why does pain have its sharp edge rather than some other shape? Philosophers have long puzzled over qualia. Some argue they are irreducible, beyond physical explanation. Others insist they must eventually be explained by neuroscience, even if we do not yet know how. But the mystery remains. Subjective experience seems to resist being captured in objective terms. Consider the thought experiment of Mary, a scientist who knows everything about color but has lived only in a black and white room. When she finally sees red, does she learn something new? Many say yes. She gains the experience itself, something knowledge alone could not give. Level 71 invites us to reflect on the depth of our own experiences. Behind every fact lies feeling. Behind every explanation lies the glow of awareness. Qualia remind us that reality is not only external, but lived from within, and that the richness of being cannot be reduced to numbers alone. Level 72, the trolley problem. Imagine a runaway trolley rushing down a track. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the rails. You stand beside a lever that can divert the trolley onto another track. Where one person is tied, do you pull the lever, sacrificing one to save 5? This is the trolley problem. A thought experiment in ethics. It forces us to confront the clash between utilitarian reasoning, maximize lives saved, and deontological duty. Never deliberately harm an innocent. Both principles feel compelling, yet they conflict. Variations sharpen the dilemma. What if saving 5 required pushing one person onto the track with your own hands? Most feel pulling a lever is different from pushing, though both result in one death. Why? The puzzle exposes the complexity of moral intuition. The trolley problem is not only theoretical, it echoes in decisions about war, medicine, technology, anywhere lives and values collide. Even modern debates about self-driving cars draw upon it. Should machines be programmed to sacrifice one passenger to save many pedestrians? Level 72 reminds us that morality is rarely simple arithmetic. It is lived in shades of responsibility, intention, and consequence. The trolley problem is not solved, but lived. Each time we face choices where no option is pure. Level 73. The problem of other minds. You know your own mind through experience. You feel your thoughts, your emotions, your awareness. But how can you know that others truly have minds as you do? We see bodies, hear words, watch behavior. We infer that behind them lies consciousness. But this inference is never direct. It is always assumption. Philosophers call this the problem of other minds. Skeptics might ask, how can I be sure that anyone else is conscious, and not a cleverly behaving machine? How do I know others are not mere appearances, empty shells without awareness? Most of us dismiss such doubts in daily life. We trust the signs of mind, laughter, tears, words, gestures. Empathy draws us into communion. Yet the problem lingers in thought, reminding us that consciousness is private, sealed within each being. The question deepens with artificial intelligence. If a machine speaks like us, acts like us, does it feel? Or is it only mimicry? A shadow without inner light. Level 73 invites us to humility. We cannot see another's mind directly, but we can honor the mystery of its presence. Perhaps the deepest response is not proof, but recognition. The willingness to treat others as conscious, to meet them with respect and care. Level 74. Identity in the digital age. In the ancient world, identity was tied to place, family, and tradition. Today, in the digital age, it flows across screens, shifting between profiles, usernames, and avatars. Who we are online may not fully match who we are offline. This fluidity opens freedom. We can explore sides of ourselves,
connect across distances, create communities that transcend geography. Yet it also raises questions. If identity can be curated, is it authentic? If we wear masks, do we risk losing sight of the face beneath? The digital self is both mirror and performance. Photos, posts, messages, all shape how others see us, but they also shape how we see ourselves. The boundary between self and image blurs.
Philosophy asks whether this fragmentation weakens identity or reveals its true nature. Perhaps the self has always been multiple, a bundle of roles and reflections. The digital world only makes this visible. Level 74 reminds us that identity is not fixed but woven, online and offline alike. To live well in the digital age is to use its freedom without losing authenticity, to recognize the masks while still seeking the face. The question of who we are grows only deeper in the light of the screen. Level 75, the extended mind.
Where does the mind end? Is it contained within the skull? Or does it extend into the tools we use, the world we inhabit? Philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers proposed the theory of the extended mind, that cognition is not confined to the brain, but spreads into the environment. A notebook, for example, serves as external memory. A calculator extends our reasoning. Even smartphones now hold thoughts, reminders, and connections, functioning as parts of our cognitive system. If the brain and the tool work together seamlessly, why should the mind stop at the skin? This idea challenges the traditional view of mind as internal. It suggests that thinking is not only in neurons, but in networks, not only in brains, but in bodies and worlds. We are not isolated minds, but beings embedded in systems that shape thought. Level 75 invites us to see the mind not as a box, but as a horizon, always reaching outward. Our environment is part of us, our tools extensions of us. To care for mind, then, is also to care for world. For in shaping one, we shape the other. Level 76, Transhumanism and the Future of Humanity. What does it mean to be human? And what happens if we move beyond it? Transhumanism imagines a future where technology enhances our bodies and minds, extending life, amplifying intelligence, even merging flesh with machine. Advocates see this as progress, a continuation of humanity's quest to overcome limitation. Why accept disease, aging, or death if science can cure them? Why accept the boundaries of memory or speed of thought if technology can expand them? To some, transhumanism is not betrayal but fulfillment of human potential. Yet critics warn of dangers. If some can afford enhancement while others cannot, will inequality deepen? If machines fuse with mind, will we lose what makes us human? If mortality disappears, will meaning vanish with it? The dream of transhumanism raises ancient questions in modern form. What is the essence of humanity? Our limits, or our ability to transcend them? If we erase suffering, do we also erase wisdom born from struggle? Level 76 invites us to hold both awe and caution. Technology opens possibility, but possibility demands responsibility. The future may bring transformation beyond imagining, but the question remains, will we become more human or less? Level 77, the paradox of tolerance of technology. Technology promises freedom, but often creates new forms of dependence. We invent tools to serve us, yet we become servants to them. This is the paradox of technological tolerance. Consider the smartphone. It offers connection, knowledge, convenience, yet it also consumes attention, reshapes relationships, and rewires desire. To live with it requires tolerance, accepting both gifts and costs. The same holds for cars, for factories, for the internet. Each invention liberates, and each binds. The paradox deepens as technology advances. Artificial intelligence may solve problems, but it may also narrow human responsibility. Automation may free us from labor, but it may also strip labor of meaning. In each case, technology solves one tension while creating another.
We cannot reject technology entirely, nor can we embrace it blindly. The challenge is balance, using tools without surrendering to them, shaping them without letting them shape us entirely. Level 77 reminds us that technology is never neutral. It carries values, choices, and consequences. To live wisely with it is to ask not only what it can do, but what it should do, and what it makes of us in return. Level 78, the paradox of hedonism. Happiness is often pursued directly. We seek pleasure, joy, satisfaction. Yet the paradox of hedonism teaches that the more we chase happiness, the more it eludes us. Imagine someone desperate to be happy. Every effort, every choice is aimed at joy. Yet joy slips away, for it cannot be grasped directly. Happiness, like sleep, comes not when pursued, but when allowed. This paradox suggests that happiness is a byproduct of living well, not a goal in itself. It arises when we love, when we create, when we serve, not because we chased it, but because we forgot to chase. Ancient philosophers knew this. Aristotle spoke of flourishing as a life of virtue, not mere pleasure. Epicurus taught that peace of mind, not indulgence, was the truest pleasure. Even modern psychology echoes this. Fulfillment comes from meaning, not from constant pursuit of delight. Level 78 reminds us that happiness is like a shadow. When we turn away to live, to act, to give, it follows. When we turn toward it and grasp, it vanishes. To live wisely is to stop chasing and start being. Level 79, the paradox of tolerance of freedom. Freedom is cherished as the highest value. Yet freedom, when limitless, can destroy itself. If all are free to act without restraint, the freedom of the weak collapses under the power of the strong. This paradox appears in politics, in society, even in personal life. A society too free becomes lawless, where only might matters. A life too free, without responsibility, becomes chaos, where choice loses meaning. Freedom requires boundaries to endure. Isaiah Berlin distinguished between negative freedom, the absence of constraints, and positive freedom, the ability to act meaningfully. Too much of the first can erode the second. True freedom is not mere lack of restraint, but the space to grow, to act, to flourish. The paradox is clear. To preserve freedom, we must limit it. Laws, norms, responsibilities, all restrain us, yet they make deeper freedom possible. Without them, liberty collapses into domination. Level 79 invites us to see freedom not as absence, but as balance. It is the structure that lets choice matter, the soil that lets responsibility grow. True freedom is not doing anything at all, but doing what makes life meaningful. Level 80, the paradox of self-improvement. We strive to improve ourselves, to be wiser, kinder, stronger, freer. Yet the paradox of self-improvement is that striving can become a trap. The more we try to change ourselves, the more we reinforce the self we wish to escape. Consider the desire to be humble. If we try to become humble, we may take pride in our humility. If we try to force happiness, we become anxious about our unhappiness. Improvement becomes self-defeating. This paradox does not mean growth is impossible, but that it requires gentleness. Change often comes not by direct attack, but by indirect cultivation. We grow humble not by obsessing over humility, but by caring for others. We grow wise not by chasing wisdom, but by living attentively. Eastern philosophies echo this truth. Taoism teaches that forcing the self leads to resistance, but flowing with the way of things leads to harmony. Zen teaches that striving for enlightenment blinds us to the very presence of it here and now. Level 80 reminds us that to improve is to let go. Growth is real, but it is not a conquest. It is a garden, tended patiently, watered quietly, allowed to bloom in its own time. Level 81, freedom and responsibility. Freedom is a gift, but it is never free of weight.
With every choice comes responsibility. The truth that we are accountable for what we decide. To be free is not only to have options, but to bear the burden of their consequences. Sartre described this as anguish, the realization that in choosing for ourselves. We also shape the image of humanity. Every act sets an example, a suggestion of what human life can be. Freedom is not private but universal, for in living we speak a silent philosophy to the world.
Yet responsibility is often avoided. We blame circumstance, others, or fate. We hide behind excuses. But each avoidance is itself a choice, another exercise of freedom disguised as necessity. There is no escape. This is heavy, but it is also dignifying. Responsibility gives depth to freedom, preventing it from dissolving into whim. It reminds us that our lives matter, that each act carries meaning.
Level 81 invites us to embrace freedom, not as license, but as responsibility. To live is to answer for ourselves, to accept that our choices ripple outward. In that burden lies the possibility of greatness. Level 82, the veil of ignorance. John Rawls imagined a thought experiment to test justice. Suppose you must design the rules of society, but you do so from behind a veil of ignorance. You do not know your race, gender, wealth, talents, or status. You might be rich or poor, privileged or oppressed. What rules would you create?
Rawls argued that behind the veil, rational people would choose fairness. Since no one knows their place, they would ensure that even the least advantaged are protected. Justice. Then, is fairness chosen without bias? The veil of ignorance strips away self-interest and forces universal perspective. It does not guarantee perfection, but it challenges us to imagine society as if we could be anyone. This principle reaches beyond politics. In personal life, too, we can ask, if I did not know my position, would I still think this choice fair? The veil becomes a mirror for empathy, pushing us beyond our own narrow view. Level 82 reminds us that justice begins with imagination, the ability to see from every side. To live justly is to act as if we could stand in the place of the other. Level 83, the prisoner's dilemma. Two prisoners are held separately. Each is offered a deal: betray the other and go free, while the other serves a long sentence. If both betray, both are punished. If both remain silent, both receive only a light sentence. Rational calculation suggests betrayal, yet if both betray, they are worse off than if both had trusted. This is the prisoner's dilemma, a puzzle of cooperation and self-interest. It shows how rational individuals, seeking their own advantage, can create worse outcomes for all. The dilemma echoes in daily life, in business, in politics, in trust between friends or nations. Should we compete or cooperate? Should we act for ourselves or for the greater good? Game theory shows that cooperation can emerge when trust, reputation, or repeated interaction encourages loyalty, but the risk of betrayal always lingers, making cooperation fragile. Level 83 reminds us that trust is the fragile thread of society. To act only for ourselves is to weaken the whole. To risk cooperation is dangerous, but without it, community dissolves. The dilemma is not solved once, but lived in every choice where self-interest and mutual good collide. Level 84, Utilitarianism and the Greatest Happiness. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill argued that morality can be measured by one principle: the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Actions are right if they maximize pleasure and minimize pain. This is utilitarianism, a philosophy of consequences. Its appeal is clarity. Rather than relying on vague duties or traditions, it asks, what outcome produces the most well-being? It is democratic, counting each person's happiness equally, and practical, offering a guide for real decisions.
Yet utilitarianism also stirs unease. Should one innocent be sacrificed if it saves many? Should truth be hidden if lies bring greater happiness? The simplicity of the principle sometimes collides with the complexity of human dignity. Mill refined the view. distinguishing higher and lower pleasures, intellectual, moral, and artistic joys as more valuable than mere sensation. But the challenge remains: can happiness be measured, weighed, compared? Level 84 invites us to see utilitarianism not as a final answer, but as a lens. It reminds us that consequences matter, that morality cannot ignore suffering or well-being. Yet it also warns that numbers alone cannot capture the full depth of human worth. Level 85, Deontology and Duty. In contrast to utilitarianism's focus on outcomes, deontological ethics grounds morality in duty. Immanuel Kant argued that some acts are right or wrong regardless of consequences. To lie is wrong, even if it saves lives. To break a promise is wrong, even if it brings advantage. The power of this view is its clarity. It respects persons as ends in themselves, never merely as means. It grounds morality not in calculation, but in principle, in the dignity of rational beings. Yet deontology too has limits. Can duty be absolute? Should we never lie, even to save a friend from harm? Should we never break a promise, even when keeping it causes suffering? The rigidity of principle can clash with compassion. Still, duty gives morality strength. It resists the temptation to excuse wrongs by appealing to results. It insists that some things are sacred, not to be bargained away.
Level 85 reminds us that morality has two faces: care for consequences and respect for duty. Neither alone suffices. To live well may require both: the compassion of outcomes and the integrity of principles, woven together in the fabric of life. Level 86, Virtue Ethics and the Good Life. Long before debates about consequences and duties, Aristotle asked a simpler question: what kind of person should I be? His answer was virtue ethics, the cultivation of character, the pursuit of excellence in living.
Virtue is the balance between extremes. Courage lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lies between stinginess and waste. Wisdom lies between ignorance and cleverness misused. To live well is to find the mean, to shape the self into harmony, happiness, or eudaimonia. For Aristotle, was not fleeting pleasure, but flourishing. The fullness of life lived with virtue, purpose, and reason. It is not what happens to us, but how we live. The deep satisfaction of a soul aligned with its highest possibilities.
Unlike rigid rules or calculations, virtue ethics is practical. It recognizes that life is complex, that judgment and character guide us where formulas cannot. It asks us to practice goodness, not once, but daily, until it becomes second nature. Level 86 reminds us that morality is not only about what we do, but about who we are. To seek virtue is to seek the art of living, to shape ourselves into beings who embody the good, not only in moments of choice, but in the quiet rhythm of everyday life. Level 87, the Golden Mean. Aristotle's vision of virtue rests on the golden mean, the idea that goodness lies between extremes. Too much or too little leads to vice. Balance leads to excellence. Take courage. Lacking it, we become cowards. Having too much, we rush into danger recklessly. True courage stands in the middle, firm, measured, willing to act when needed, but not blinded by bravado.
The mean is not the same for everyone. What is balanced for one may be excess for another. A soldier's courage differs from a child's. The golden mean is not a rigid formula, but a principle of harmony, asking us to find the right measure in our own lives. This principle applies beyond morality. In art, balance creates beauty. In health, moderation sustains strength. In thought, balance avoids dogmatism and indecision alike. Life flourishes when we avoid extremes and cultivate proportion. Level 87 reminds us that virtue is not found at the edges, but in the middle path. The golden mean is not mediocrity, but mastery. The art of knowing when enough is enough. In balance, we discover strength, beauty, and wisdom. Level 88, the allegory of the cave. Plato imagined humanity chained in a cave.
seeing only shadows flickering on the wall. To the prisoners, the shadows are reality, for they know nothing beyond. But one escapes, sees the fire, the puppets, and finally the sun itself, the source of all light.
This is the allegory of the cave, a story of ignorance and awakening. The cave is the world of appearances, of opinions and illusions. The journey upward is philosophy itself, the struggle to see truth beyond shadow. The allegory reminds us that what we take as reality may be only a surface, shaped by custom, habit, or manipulation. To question, to turn around, is painful. The light blinds at first, but to see clearly, to glimpse the truth, is to be transformed. Plato warns that those who awaken may be scorned by those who remain in shadows. Yet the philosopher's task is to return, to help others see. Knowledge is not escape, but responsibility. Level 88 invites us to ask, what shadows do we mistake for truth? What light waits beyond our cave? The allegory whispers that awakening is always possible, if we have the courage to turn. Level 89, Plato's theory of forms.
For Plato, the world of senses is fleeting. Objects change, decay, vanish. Yet behind them lies a higher reality, the forms, eternal and unchanging, the form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the good. These are perfect patterns, of which earthly things are mere reflections. A beautiful face fades, but beauty itself endures. A just law may fail, but justice itself remains. To know truth is to turn the mind from the shifting world toward these eternal forms. Plato's vision shaped centuries of thought, offering a foundation for metaphysics, art, and morality. Critics argue the forms are abstractions, not realities. Yet the idea persists in every search for universals, every appeal to standards beyond time and place. The forms remind us that ideals guide life. We may never touch perfect justice, but we strive toward it. We may never hold pure beauty, but we are moved by its glimpses. The world of forms is not far away, but woven into our longing, our imagination, our striving for what transcends. Level 89 invites us to lift our gaze, to see not only the passing things, but the timeless truth they echo. In every shadow lies a hint of the form, in every imperfection, the whisper of perfection. Level 90, the form of the good, above all other forms. Plato placed the form of the good. Just as the sun gives light by which all is seen, the good gives truth and meaning by which all is known. Without it, knowledge is blind, virtue aimless, life without direction. The good is not simply pleasure, or utility, or power. It is that which makes all things intelligible and worthwhile. To see the good is to see the source of justice, beauty, and truth. Yet the good cannot be fully defined. It is beyond words, beyond categories, glimpsed only in reflection. Like light too bright for the eyes, Plato compared it to the sun. We do not stare at it directly, but through its light we see everything else. The form of the good calls us to orient our lives, not toward fleeting desires, but toward what is enduring and ultimate. It is not only an idea, but a direction, a compass for the soul. Level 90 invites us to ask, what is our good? What light guides us? Whether we name it truth, love, God, or meaning. The call remains the same. To seek the good is to seek the highest horizon, the light by which life becomes clear. Level 91, the Stoic Logos. For the Stoics, the universe was not chaos, but order, guided by the Logos, the rational principle shaping all things. To live well was to align with this Logos, to accept the flow of events as part of a greater harmony. This vision gave strength. Storms, losses, even death were not random cruelties, but threads in a vast design. The wise person learns not to resist, but to flow. Not to rage against fate, but to embrace it. This acceptance is not resignation, but freedom. For when we cease fighting the inevitable, we find peace. The Stoics taught that virtue is the only true good. Wealth, health, reputation, all can vanish in an instant. But the soul that lives in accord with reason, courage, and justice remains unshaken. Level 91 invites us to hear the Stoic call. The Logos may be hidden, its pattern mysterious, but trust in it frees us. To live according to nature is to live with dignity, no matter what fate brings. Level 92, Fate and Amor Fati.
Nietzsche urged not only acceptance of fate, but love of it. Amor fati. Do not merely endure what happens, he said, but embrace it, affirm it, even if it is painful. To love fate is to love life in its entirety. This vision challenges us. Can we love not only our joys, but our sorrows? Can we affirm not only triumphs, but failures? Amor fati asks us to see every event as necessary, every moment as part of the whole that makes us who we are.
It is not passivity, but strength. To love fate is to stand before life without bitterness. To transform even tragedy into affirmation, it is to say yes, not only to the easy parts of existence, but to all of it. Level 92 reminds us that life cannot be edited like a book. We cannot erase chapters, but we can love the story as a whole. To embrace fate is to embrace ourselves, to find freedom in the necessity of being. Level 93, the eternal soul. Across cultures, the idea of an eternal soul has given hope that life does not end with death. Plato spoke of the soul as immortal, reborn in different forms, carrying knowledge forgotten and remembered. In Hinduism, the soul, Atman, is timeless, flowing through cycles of rebirth until it returns to ultimate unity. The soul comforts us, promising that death is not final. It explains the depth of identity, the sense that we are more than passing matter. It grounds morality, suggesting that our choices echo beyond this life.
Yet the idea also faces doubt. What proof can there be of immortality? If the soul exists, where is it? Is it substance, spirit, consciousness, or something beyond all categories? The question remains unanswered, yet it endures because it touches our deepest longing. We want to believe that love, awareness, and meaning are not erased by death.
Level 93 invites us to reflect on the mystery of soul, whether eternal or fleeting. The sense of inner depth, the spark that makes us feel infinite even in a fragile body, is undeniable. Perhaps eternity is not measured in time, but in the timeless presence of the soul within each moment. Level 94, the fear of death. Death shadows every life. We know it will come, yet we resist its thought. The fear of death has shaped religions, philosophies, and cultures, driving us to seek meaning, legacy, or transcendence. Epicurus sought to quiet this fear. "Death is nothing to us," he wrote. "For when we are, death is not. And when death is, we are not." Fear comes from imagining death as an experience. But in truth, it is the end of experience. There is nothing to fear in nothingness. Others see death differently. Heidegger taught that to face death honestly is to awaken to authentic life. By remembering our mortality, we live more deeply, aware of the preciousness of time. Still, the fear lingers, not only of nothingness, but of separation, of leaving unfinished love, of losing what we cherish. Level 94 invites us not to banish fear, but to let it sharpen life. To fear death is to affirm life. To remember mortality is to live more fully, to love more urgently, to waste less of what is given. Level 95, immortality and its discontents. If death is feared, immortality seems like salvation, yet philosophers have asked whether eternal life would truly be desirable. Bernard Williams argued that immortality might become unbearable. Without death, life could lose urgency, repetition could breed boredom, and meaning could fade. Death gives shape to existence, a frame that makes each moment precious. Without it, would joy dull into monotony? Others imagine immortality as endless growth, infinite exploration. Perhaps the human spirit could always find new horizons. Perhaps eternity would not be dull but boundless.
Religions promise eternal life, yet often not as endless time, but as transformation, a union with God, or return to a higher reality, where eternity is not quantity but quality, beyond the measure of days. Level 95 invites us to see that both death and immortality carry paradox. Death terrifies us, yet it gives meaning. Immortality tempts us, yet it may rob life of its edge. Perhaps wisdom lies not in fleeing either, but in embracing the finitude we have, living as though each moment were eternal in itself.
Level 96, the meaning of life. Across centuries, cultures, and philosophies, the question returns: what is the meaning of life? Is there a single answer, or as many answers as there are lives?
Some point to God, to divine purpose, to eternal destiny. Others see meaning in love, in service, in the bonds of community. Existentialists insist that life has no given meaning, only the meaning we create. Nihilists declare that it has none at all, and that freedom lies in accepting this emptiness.
Perhaps the meaning of life is not a riddle to be solved, but a path to be lived. Meaning is not hidden in the stars, waiting to be found, but woven in our days. When we love, when we act with courage, when we bring beauty into the world.
Level 96 reminds us that meaning is not a single truth, but a living act. Each moment is an answer. Each choice whispers a response. The question does not fade, but in living it, we discover our own reply. Level 97, the unity of opposites.
Heraclitus taught that reality is woven from opposites. Day exists because of night. Life is defined by death. Joy is felt through sorrow. Without contrast, nothing could be understood. This unity of opposites shapes not only nature, but human life. We long for permanence, yet we thrive in change. We seek peace, yet struggle awakens growth. We crave freedom, yet structure gives freedom its form. To see opposites as enemies is to live in conflict. To see them as companions is to find harmony. Heraclitus called it the hidden harmony, deeper than any surface discord. Level 97 invites us to see tension not as failure, but as essence. Life is both fleeting and eternal, both fragile and strong. In every opposite lies its partner, and in that union, the world finds balance. Level 98, the mystery of being. Perhaps the deepest question is not about life, death, meaning, or morality, but simply this: why is there something rather than nothing? Martin Heidegger called this the fundamental question of metaphysics. Everything else presupposes being, yet being itself resists explanation. Science can describe how the universe unfolds, but not why it exists at all. To ask this question is to stand at the edge of thought. We sense the contingency of all things, how easily nothing might have been. The sheer presence of being overwhelms, filling us with awe. Perhaps no answer is possible. Perhaps being is simply given, beyond reason. But the mystery itself transforms us, drawing us into wonder. Level 98 reminds us that philosophy begins and ends in astonishment. To marvel at being is to touch the root of thought, the silence beneath all questions. Level 99, the silence beyond thought. After all the arguments, all the paradoxes, all the systems of philosophy, there remains silence, beyond words, beyond concepts. There is an awareness that cannot be captured, only lived.
Mystics across traditions have pointed here. Words gesture, but they also fail. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The truth that can be defined is already diminished.
Silence is not ignorance, but presence. It is the mind resting, the self dissolving into the moment. It is not the end of philosophy, but its fulfillment. the point where thought bows before the mystery it cannot master. Level 99 invites us to honor silence, not as emptiness, but as fullness beyond speech. In silence, we encounter life directly, without filter, without shadow. In silence, philosophy becomes experience. Level 100, wisdom. At the summit of 100 levels, we return not to answers, but to wisdom. Wisdom is not knowledge alone, nor cleverness, nor accumulation of facts. It is the art of living well, of knowing what matters and acting upon it. The wise person embraces uncertainty without despair, seeks truth without arrogance, lives with compassion without calculation. Wisdom is balance between reason and emotion, between self and other, between striving and letting go. It is not the possession of the old alone, nor of the learned, but of anyone who learns to live attentively, gratefully, humbly. It is not perfection, but practice, renewed each day in small choices, in quiet acts. Level 100 closes the journey not with finality, but with openness. Wisdom is never finished, never fully held. It is a path, not a destination. To walk it is to live in wonder, to embrace the paradoxes of life, to love the questions as much as the answers. The journey through philosophy is endless, but in seeking, we have already begun to live wisely.